webcast, if that's okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second Cabinet of the week. I promised that we won't be making this a regular habit, but for the second time this week, we have an extraordinary or an exceptional Cabinet to discuss three different items, the first being devolution, second local government reorganisation, and the third to look at our proposals for our care home improvement programme. So we have apologies for absence, and they're from Councillor Fairhurst, Councillor Bowerman, both of whom are on holiday, and Councillor Henderson, who's the chairman of the Children and Young People's Select Committee, who equally is away at the moment. Are there any declarations of interest? I think David wants to just advise us a little bit about those of us who are dual hatters.
So, members, the position is exactly the same as it was at full council. Those of you who are members of other councils should declare that, but can participate as a result of the dispensation from the Conduct Advisory Panel. And we will take it as read that all members are declaring a personal interest in relation to their allowance from HCC. But again, no reason why you can't participate because of the dispensation.
Super, thanks, David. So, Zoe.
So I am a twin hatter of Gosport Borough and also the Fire Authority.
And Kirsty?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I declare an interest as a Test Valley Borough Councillor.
Jan?
Yes, Chairman. I am a Winchester City Councillor as well as a Hampshire County Councillor.
And Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a Hart District Councillor, so an interest on that.
And I declare an interest as a Test Valley Borough Councillor as well. And Russell and Ros are not members of other councils. Lucky them. So we have one deputation for us to consider, and that's from Chris Holloway from the Hampshire Climate Action Network. So welcome, Chris. It's on our first item anyway, which is item 5. Do you want to come across and give us your deputation when you're ready? So thank you for coming along. You're very welcome. Take your time, and you've got 10 minutes to give us your point of view, and start when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. I think I know most of you. I'm Chris Holloway and I chair Hampshire Climate Action Network. And mostly I'm actually here to say thank you because I was watching the council meeting yesterday with great interest using the YouTube link and was delighted that you'd managed to agree cross-party support for the amendment that we'd asked you, at least as much of it as can be squeezed into your word limit. But thank you very much for that. That's really good. And I know I don't need to urge you as Cabinet to accept the amendment that was recommended by full council yesterday. So I turned up mostly to say thank you, but also because I thought, excuse me, I could take a moment to explain the bigger picture and why we were so enthusiastic about you doing it. Because it shows how we can work together, the community and local government, on tackling the climate crisis. We had a Hampshire Climate Action Network meeting in January looking at the white paper before we knew what was going to happen, just looking at the white paper. Excuse me. And we were worried because we realised that the new combined authorities were going to be given responsibility, a duty to have a strategic overview on transport and spatial planning and the economy, which are the three most important things to get right if we want to tackle runaway climate change. We need to end pollution from transport and from buildings, and we need to work out how we can have a green economy without consuming more than a reasonable share of the world's resources. So we were thinking, well, what can we do to try and make sure that these things are done within the framework of a strategy for the climate? And we thought, rather than relying on each individual mayor and each individual combined authority, what we needed to do was to press the government to say that this was a responsibility for all of them. And so we decided we needed climate to be written into the devolution bill. So then we got together with colleagues in the South East Climate Alliance, which covers Hampshire and Surrey and Sussex and Kent, and they agreed. And then we wrote round to climate networks across the country. I ended up with 13 climate networks all signing a letter to the minister. Because we want to have a duty to have an overall strategy and then to create an action plan, obviously working with all the unitaries and all the authorities within the combined authority for a coordinated action plan. And we also ask the government to put it in its performance framework so that everybody can see what progress is being made. So it's inspiring to see Hampshire taking the lead in saying we along with the community, we think this is actually something that's a national issue. And with enough of us saying the same thing, we can hope that the government is going to take notice. And I just wanted to add, if they don't, we need to do it anyway. So we're in Hampshire Climate Action Network, we're already thinking about becoming Hampshire and the Solent Climate Network, and under that umbrella it's our plan to ask the mayoral candidates and ask the combined authorities to say, well, whatever the government says, we are going to make sure we have a strategy so that we look at it all in a combined way and join ourselves up. But again, thank you very much and thank you for your time.
So, Chris, thank you so much for letting us know. I recognise that you'd written to us earlier this week, and you might have been expecting to come and say something a bit different to that. But we were pleased to receive your letter and your recommendations, and equally to work with Martin yesterday to get that wording in. And we'll be reflecting that just in a few minutes when we get to the debate part of it. So, good. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to item 5, which is the English Devolution White Paper and the response to the government's devolution consultation. It's a report from Gary to come and talk us through it, if that's okay.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. As this was covered in plenty of detail at full council yesterday, I'm not going to spend too long on the introduction. What you have before you is the County Council's proposed response to MHCLG consultation launched last month regarding the proposal to form a mayoral combined county authority for local government areas in Hampshire County Council, Portsmouth City Council, the Isle of Wight Council and Southampton City Council. And you'll see in the papers before you today our proposed consultation responses included in Appendix A. You'll also note the letter from the Chairman of County Council yesterday, which is included in your papers today, setting out the proposed amended recommendations agreed by full council yesterday relating to question 11 and question 13 in the proposed consultation response. So many thanks, Leader, and welcome any questions.
Super, thanks very much, Gary. I think we've all got to the point where we've talked about this so much over the last few weeks that I think we all know it inside out. Colleagues, any questions of Gary before we move into debate? Jan.
Quick question, if I may. Thank you, Chairman. Around the consultation, we know that closes, I think, on the 13th of April, once everybody's submitted their responses. What happens next? When do we hear back and how do we act on that? And is there a bit of a roadmap that starts to emerge once that consultation has closed and we've heard back from it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Yes, it's a very timely question and one that we're sort of all watching with interest and are in a fairly regular dialogue with senior civil servants around. So it's fair to say, unlike previous rounds of devolution that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years, this is not a negotiation. So with previous devolution rounds, there'd be this big kind of negotiate exercise with government around agreeing powers, responsibilities, funding pots. It's not being driven like that this time round. So what we're expecting is the national consultation period will run to mid-April. Government will then inevitably need to digest those national consultation findings with a very kind of open mind. But what we're then expecting is government will lay the statutory instruments to create the new mayoral combined authorities by the end of the summer and certainly early autumn. And that will then be our trigger as the constituent authorities in the local areas to then start the groundwork in terms of forming the arrangements and the necessary work that we need to develop between then and May 2026, when the mayoral election will happen. What was then explained at the member briefing earlier in the week, you would then have a year of shadow combined authority from May 2026 to May 2027 as a new authority is established, and it will be up and running in its full form from May 2027.
Sorry, Steve.
Thank you, Leader. Gary, thank you for the report. I know there's been a lot of work in the couple of months leading up to this, but I wonder if I could ask you, and I'm sorry this is a long question, but hopefully you can give a fairly succinct answer. In terms of the devolution opportunities and priorities, how will they benefit all the residents and communities across Hampshire?
Thank you, Councillor Forster. I'll try and be succinct to what is a large question and subject matter. So, based on the white paper before Christmas, there's clearly an intention from government for a significant numbers of new powers and responsibilities. There's upwards of 50 new powers and responsibilities that will be devolved down to a mayor, discharged through a mayoral combined authority, with the intention that that benefits all residents and communities. I just reassure all members that we've been already through a fairly robust and extensive joint exercise with our neighbouring unitary authorities in terms of some of that early thinking around how would we discharge those powers and responsibilities. And we've framed that prior to the white paper in terms of an asks for government, but the thinking has already progressed in terms of localising what those powers and responsibilities could mean in an area like Hampshire. And there's some areas of focus around net zero, reducing inequality, making sure that we're focusing that on some of our most deprived communities. The devil will always be in the detail then as we move forward. And one of the most important aspects of the consultation response is how do we structure the governance in such a way that ensures that all communities and all local voices are heard across Hampshire and appropriately represented. And that is work that will be ongoing up to the formation of the combined authority.
Yep, Steve.
Thank you for that. That was a dragon's den concise answer. So well done and most helpful. Thank you.
Given that Gary's working with a form that only allows a certain number of characters in each box, he's probably quite used to condensing things by now. Any other questions, everyone? No. Okay, Gary, thank you so much. So, colleagues, we have the item in front of us, which is effectively a copy across of the item that the recommendations that were presented to council yesterday. And as you know, for anyone watching, for those of us that were there was an amendment agreed by council to change things around. Now, Marie, I think we can project it up onto the screen and then we can show anybody watching this at home what that actually said. It's quite long, so I don't really propose to read it out if that's okay. There we go. So essentially what we're doing is to agree to, we've been asked by council to make these amendments to the recommendations. I don't know whether...
Yes, Chairman, I would move that we accept those recommendations to our response as laid out in the Chairman's letter.
And Leader, I'll second that.
So that's duly moved and seconded. And I'm grateful yesterday to Councillor Todd, the leader of Winchester City Council, also one of our colleagues, for bringing these forward. Essentially, the first part talks about how we create the combined authority. They're the committee, effectively, that sit around the mayor, and how we ensure that there is a voice for the district and borough councils in the existing local government structure around that. And the second point B is the amendment to that Chris was referring to, and also Councillor Wallace was also raising it yesterday, in terms of reflecting the greater emphasis on climate and on the need to address climate change as part of the strategic authority. and there is the challenge we have of fitting everything into our 1,000-character limit, and so our current answer is 1,000 characters, and so something's got to come out to put that in. But we will find a way of doing that, and that's why it leaves delegated authority to the Deputy Chief Executive, Gary, and myself to agree what that wording will be. But what I can reassure everybody is that we'll make sure that that is reflected, and the asks of the Climate Action Networks in their letter to us, which I think was an entirely reasonable and good one, will be reflected in that as well. So any debate from colleagues around that proposal? Zoe?
Just very briefly, to echo my comments yesterday, is personally to thank Chris for her deputation today, but obviously also to note and thank the open letter from the South East Climate Alliance Group. You know, when we look at climate strategies, it is really important that we have that cross-party agreement. You mentioned Councillor Wallace and Councillor Todd that obviously proposed the amendment yesterday. That coordination is obviously cross-party, but it is also across all of our region, our districts and our boroughs and our parishes, which is really important of why we look at that central climate change strategy. When we look at things like our transport, our economy, our housing and our land, and protecting our land and habitat, but also those wider secondary impacts on our health and well-being, and also our skills and our jobs and our economy in the green and blue industries. And just very briefly is to say on devolution itself, this is a fantastic opportunity. I'm really excited of the benefits I think it will bring to our region, specifically when we talk about our economy, our businesses here, and we have some large global businesses that contribute fantastically locally, but also globally to the one-man bands. And I think that's really important when we talk about enterprise and innovation. I think it's also exciting when we talk about how we move, our strategic transport and connecting people within our region, and also our skills and our employment. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Russell?
Thank you, Leader. I'd also like to welcome this amendment on climate. I think we've got a really good record on climate action in Hampshire. This goes back to the Hampshire 2050 Commission, which put climate change as its number one priority. That was actually 2018, I think. We then had our climate emergency declaration under previous leader Keith Manns in 2019, and I think we've done a good job since then of getting lots of initiatives underway. And it's not just because Hampshire's vulnerable to climate change because of our coastal communities and the flood risk. It's also because we want to do our bit for the planet. I'm a great believer in community climate action. I was one of the founding members of Petersfield Climate Action Network, Petersfield in East Hampshire, which has gone very well in Petersfield and is very well known. People in Petersfield are all very familiar with it. And I'm proud that Hampshire County Council has supported community climate networks through the relationship with Community Energy South and their mentoring, but also through the Energy Fund. And it is making a difference. I think we should also try, where we can, to talk about climate and biodiversity, because they are very closely linked. And in Pecan, we do quite a lot of tree planting, and that's part of tackling climate change as well. What I would like to say about the devolution opportunity is that I think it's going to be very interesting when we get to the mayoral campaign to see how the mayoral candidates address this issue. I think that if they're smart, those mayoral candidates will make climate and environment a big part of their campaigns, because there is such a massive opportunity with our 2 national parks, with the potential for wetlands, with our nature reserves, with the Havant Reservoir coming, which is going to be good for the environment. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think people in Hampshire will want to see that being part of the campaign and part of the focus for the new strategic authority. And finally, just a word about decarbonising transport, because that is a huge opportunity for the mayor whenever that person is elected. And it's not just about taking carbon out of the system. It's also about making healthier communities and tackling pollution, which also contributes to dementia and ill health generally. So there is a huge opportunity to put climate at the heart of the devolution agenda. And I, for one, hope that's what happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Kirsty.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been said before, but I think it's worth repeating that the creation of a mayor and greater devolved powers can bring real tangible change to Hampshire. The ability to create a regional transport plan and recognising that people travel in and out of our local government boundaries every day, and to bid for that large-scale infrastructure improvements, whether it's a new rail link to a major airport or a water taxi around the coast, as I know Councillor Huggins would be pleased to see. There's the potential for real tangible change is massive here, and unlocking that is really, really important and exciting. The submission says for the area to realise its full potential, strategic and investment decisions need to be taken for the whole wider geography. So we must be really ambitious for Hampshire and the whole Greater Solent, and I welcome this submission.
Thanks very much. Jan, yeah.
This is not debate really, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Chris Holloway, who I've known for many years. Chris started off as a great champion of Winchester Action on Climate Change and has now taken over at Hampshire. And Chris is so enthusiastic, so balanced, so sensible. And I just want to thank you for all that you do publicly. Well done.
So, any other debate? Everybody? No. So, Chris, I want to echo those words and from Jan and to say thank you for coming along today and taking the time to come and talk to us. And it's great to hear that actually this work that is going on at a time when there are opportunities across the entire country for for climate to be included in the various moves and responses that those areas that are both on the devolution priority programme and those that will follow, to have that input into it is a really positive step, and to know that it originates in Hampshire is even even greater feather in our cap. So I'm glad that we can reciprocate that in terms of making sure that we reflect it as well in our recommendation today. And you're right, if the government don't listen, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And so I equally echo Russell's comments in saying that I very much hope the mayoral candidates will be bringing those issues forward. Devolution is a huge opportunity for Hampshire. I've said more than enough on it over the last few weeks to more than enough people to need to bore you again here with it, but it is a really positive step for us. And my final point is just to highlight that we started this conversation last summer and with my colleagues Lorna Filker in Southampton, Steve Pitt in Portsmouth and Phil Jordan on the Isle of Wight. We started working towards the situation that Gary described in terms of expecting us to negotiate a deal with government. And in fact, that's changed into something a bit different, but that doesn't mean that the aspirations that we had as part of that negotiation and as part of that work that we did through the summer and autumn of last year are lost. They still are, there's still a blueprint and a plan there for whoever the mayor might be to take forward those various aspirations that were identified by the four councils. And they have, all three of them, worked with me and with Hampshire with good humour and with kindness and with positivity. And that, I think, is very much the way I hope that we can take this whole devolution conversation forward, because it will benefit all of our residents and will provide us with greater autonomy and greater local decision making for years to come. So we do the, for anybody watching this and thinking that we're going mad again, we're going to vote twice. First of all, to include the amendments that have been recommended by Council yesterday into our report, and then to vote on the report itself. The recommendations that we're looking at are on page 3 of our pack, Appendix A at pages 13 to 15. Items 13 to 15, I think. Those in favour of including the amended items within the report? That's everybody. Thank you. And so those in favour of item 5, the response to the government's devolution consultation. That's unanimous again. Brilliant, thank you so much. So we go on to our next item, which is item 6, which is still confusingly the English devolution white paper, and this is where everyone gets confused between devolution and local government reorganisation. But this is the local government reorganisation piece, and this is the submission that we have to put forward by the end of the day, I think. So we need to make a decision today on it. Gary. Oh, Caroline. Sorry, it's Caroline.
We'll do a bit of a double act. I'll present the report and then we'll share any questions that come from there. So, colleagues, just to begin, I want to link back to Councillor Huggins' comment. I think this is equally a very exciting initiative from government, and I know that we've tried to go forward with it with positivity and optimism. It's an important first milestone decision that you're making here today in one of the most significant changes being proposed to the system of local government across the country, but in particular for Hampshire and the Solent area. And I use the term system quite deliberately because what we're being required to do is redesign the manner in which local government services are delivered to around 2 million people of our local population. In future, we'll have new unitary councils, each providing all local authority services to our residents. And the report itself provides valuable high-level data and evidence to support the recommendation that at this stage, as you know, we can report progress to government, but no preferred option can be recommended, as there's still a significant amount of work to be done over the next few months to fully consider the appropriate number, with a focus on 3 key criteria within the report: finance, performance and place. And we and all of our local government partners provide important services to the public, but as a county council we have responsibility to ensure the safe and legal development and transition of our services. Our current revenue expenditure, as you know, is some 3.1 billion. This equates to some 52% of the total value of local government services across the wider Hampshire and the Solent. And put slightly differently, it's 85% if we look at Hampshire area alone. And if we include the schools, that adds a further £1 billion, taking that percentage to some 90%. So this is the quantum that we are responsible for as we develop new unitary arrangements. The principles for the County Council to recommendation 4 of page 17 will be key to ensuring we achieve that. So looking firstly at finance, as we are only too aware, there is a finance crisis across local government, particularly upper tier councils related to the growing demand across adults, children's and special educational needs. Local government reorganisation will not resolve that crisis, we know that, but it will help the local government system to be more efficient and effective through transformation and the removal of duplication, making the current funding go further. But government do need to address the future funding for local government alongside this reorganisation. So turning then to performance again within your report, we are, as you know, and are proud of being a high-performing organisation by any measure, but particularly as assessed by external bodies. Our staff are critical to that success. What they do for our residents every day matters. You can see the impact of our staff on page 32, including the visual diagram, which I think is really quite impactful. Articulates a snapshot of county council services, which include ensuring early years provision and school education for our children. Roads, highways and pavement networks keep us moving, including in the bad weather. Trading standards keeping us safe, and our children's and adult services, those that protect the most vulnerable in our society. And every single resident uses our services, whether in local venues, their homes or in provider services, or simply in the community. And we must ensure that we support our staff through this change and respect them and keep them at the heart of what we do. We must ensure that the high quality of our services can be maintained and grow stronger as part of developing our proposals for the future. And then looking at place, all 3 of equal importance. Whatever size of unitary we create, be that a population of 350, 400, 500, 700,000, none of these will by default be close to our communities. And we all know that communities form naturally, and therefore our proposal and our future approach must create a framework that allows the new organisations to properly connect and listen to the communities they serve. And whatever we do, these will be new approaches different to what we do now. Colleagues, this is a very, very significant milestone moment in the history of local government. I commend the recommendations to you. Thank you.
Super. Thanks very much, Carolyn. Colleagues, any questions? Russell.
Thank you, Leader. We're lucky to have some excellent town and parish councils in Hampshire, and I just wanted to ask, what will the role of these parish and town councils be in the new local government structure? Will their role change or evolve? And so, Gary, I wondered if you could give us your thoughts on that.
But we should check whether it's Gary or Carolyn.
Definitely Gary.
Apparently, it's definitely me. Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. It's a really good point, and the government white paper that we'll all be aware of that was published in December really sort of championed and echoed the role that they envisage that parish and town councils will need to play in any future arrangement, and echoing Carolyn's point that an unintended consequence of local government reorganisation is potentially local government getting further away from communities, because a unitary of any size is going to be significantly larger than that current landscape of district and borough councils that we know across the two-tier system. So there will certainly be a role for parish and town councils, and a really valuable role for them in the future. I think one thing to reflect on, though, is that an area like Hampshire is a really good illustration of it. There are areas of Hampshire at the moment that are not parished. There are a number of our sort of more urban population centres that don't have parishes. And equally, what members around the table will be aware of is that those parishes vary in terms of size and capability and reach as well. And so, you know, the area where I live in Hampshire, my parish has about 350 to 400 residents in it. Equally, there are some, you know, bigger town councils with upwards of 30 to 40,000 residents. So there is absolutely a role that parish and town councils will play and will be really valuable. But what I'm envisaging is that will be part of a wider patchwork of other governance mechanisms that brings communities closer to local government. Good examples of that we've seen in other parts of the country are things like local area planning committees, where planning decisions or licensing decisions can be taken much closer to communities, and also things like place boards or regeneration boards, which can have a real focus on place. So I think there's absolutely a really valuable role for parish and town councils, but I'm expecting there will be a patchwork of a variety of mechanisms through which local communities can be engaged.
So, Kirsty.
Thank you, Chairman. Gary, Carolyn. In other areas of the country, with new male combined authorities, some strategic responsibility for social care, transport, education and the like is as part of the discussion about those subsuming those services. If the Mayor did take on those responsibilities, how would that work in the context of local government reorganisation?
If I maybe kick off and then I'll hand over to Gary, I think that's a brilliant question to ask, because there's a lot of confusion about the new mayoral combined authority, and I think some of that is because of the change in title to strategic authority, and then that gets confused with the upper tier responsibilities and a perception that the upper tier does strategic. And of course, as a county council, we do strategic, but we also do operational, and we go into people's homes and support individuals at home. So I think there's a huge amount of confusion about who's going to do what in the new landscape. But in particular around social care, transport and education, absolutely social care and education will not go to a mayoral combined authority or the new strategic authorities. And I think it was, you know, lots of pronouncements are coming out from ministers. One that was very helpful recently was a very clear statement that the anticipation is that the mayoral combined authority will not be responsible for those statutory responsibilities. So they will sit very clearly within the gambit of the new unitary councils through local government reorganisation when that comes. Transport, Gary, I'm going to hand over to you, because a lot of the areas around transport, LEPs, etc., sit within Hampshire 2050. So I think there's a bit of an explanation there about what will happen in that area. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Councillor North. So there is a real kind of affinity and alignment to the majority of almost the strategic place-based services that sit in my directorate around strategic infrastructure, strategic planning, strategic transport. Strategic seems to be in the title of a lot of the services that I'm currently responsible for. There's an element of that strategic responsibility that is discharging the statutory duty of Hampshire County Council at the moment. So there is no direction of travel, either within the white paper or government's language, that the statutory responsibility of the upper tier authorities that would sit underneath a new combined authority would change. Good example of that is our highways responsibility will continue to sit with an upper tier organisation that is currently Hampshire County Council. Following LGR, that will be, a network of new unitary authorities. So there will still be a strategic element of statutory responsibility that will sit with the upper tier. That said, as Carolyn's then referred to, there are a series of powers and responsibilities that are currently with Hampshire County Council by virtue of the fact that we don't have a mayoral combined authority at the moment. And some good examples of that is following LEP disaggregation or the bus service improvement planning funding in areas in the country at the moment where there is a mayoral combined authority that gets channeled into the mayor and the mayoral combined authority. So Hampshire, when LEPs got disaggregated, in areas of the country where there was a mayoral combined authority, all of those LEP functions and powers and programmes went straight to the mayoral combined authority. That wasn't available in Hampshire and the Solent, just given where we're on our devolution journey. So I expect there are certain things that we are responsible for, primarily around strategic transport, public transport, and then also economic development, which would then almost certainly align better to a mayoral combined authority. And we've got that piece of work to now conclude over the next 6 to 12 months to work out, what essentially goes where.
Super, thanks. Any other questions, colleagues? No. Okay. Carolyn, Gary, as always, thank you so much for those explanations. So we move into debate. And Zoe.
I have an amendment, Leader.
Okay, so do you want to read that out for us and then?
Yes, I think we can project it as well, but if I read it out. I have no doubt that I think staff are at the forefront of our thought, and the guiding principles, our guiding principles, Hampshire County Council's guiding principles, are obviously there to guide and focus us at times of change and complexity. So therefore I am proposing an amendment to recommendation for page 17, and that addition will read: we recognise that our workforce is our most important asset, and we are committed to ensuring transparency and openness in our communication with our staff, and that our colleagues are treated respectfully and supported through the change and uncertainty ahead of us. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Zoe. And so that's an additional bullet point at point G to that paragraph, and those are the principles that we've established ourselves to guide us through the next 3 months of how we do this. I'm very happy to second that because I think that's an important addition. So with that on the floor, we're talking both to that amendment and to the general paper. Any comments from everybody? Steve.
Thank you. Just a general comment. I fully support the amendment. I have to say, I think that's really vital. Over the last couple of weeks, I've attended a number of parish meetings, and last night I was at Hart Cabinet. There was a lot of positive debate following the full council meeting a couple of days earlier, and I'm sure my colleagues have pretty much done the same over recent weeks. I know the leader has been at many meetings, which has been appreciated, being some good feedback. I thought it worth mentioning that it was particularly positive to hear the deputy leader at Hart, with support from the rest of Cabinet, talk about the perception that government funding is key, as there was open acknowledgement that Hampshire County Council is a high-performing authority and has had to cope with pressures. That's quite an about turn, well, not an about turn, it's quite an acknowledgement, because I think many of us are used to the blame game that goes on between different volunteers, which tends to be for making points, but it's really positive to get that feedback. And I wanted to relay that to all those around this table, but also across Hampshire County Council. It's really, really good news.
Super, thanks. Any other comments? Kirsty?
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, as we heard yesterday, local government reorganisation will not be the silver bullet that solves the financial trouble that the whole local government sector faces. And I think it's important that our full council chamber grasped that yesterday, so we should acknowledge that today. Sustainability and the questions around it need wider reform to social care, and that's for the Labour government to grasp that nettle and frankly deal with. As we've heard today from our Chief Executive, the crisis will not be resolved with reorganisation alone. And I hope that message is received loud and clear in the MHCLG and at a government level. On the wider proposals, it is important that we do retain a sense of place. That's important to me, and the differences in place are recognised and celebrated around our county. And I'm really pleased to hear the focus and the importance today placed on the valuable role that towns and parish councils can play to connect and retain those vital links. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. Sorry, Zoe.
Thank you, Leader. Just to echo Carolyn's, it is an opportunity and we need to look at it as an opportunity. It's an historical moment. I'm most probably slightly less excited because this is extremely complex and extremely ambitious in its time frame. And with everything, we need to have that air of caution when we leap into the unknown as we go through local government reorganisation and find our way through it. However, you know, when I look at both the agreed principles across all districts and unitaries and those that we have agreed here as Hampshire. I'm going to simplify it slightly, but I'm really pleased to see within those guiding principles that we talk about people. So we talk about our residents, we also talk about our staff. They are central, obviously, of how we build things, make things fit for the future, that they are there and that we talk about respect and having them at our core. Councillor North also mentioned their place. That's really important because we are talking about how our communities connect, what they hold dear to them, but also our place of work and our location. Also about prosperity, so our growth, our innovation, our region of how we grow and prosper and thrive. We mentioned services, so performance, that they are of high quality and our staff within them are performing within those high quality services. And lastly, pound. So we do look at that financial stability, but also public value. And as we move forward, obviously service reform, public reform, and also obviously financial settlements. You might have noticed I use 5 Ps there, and that's my simple way of thinking and remembering the things that we need to hold dear in our principles. So yeah, thank you, Leader.
Super, thanks. Any other debate, everybody? Jan?
Yeah, just really briefly, to sum up, really, I think the chairman's letter was very good to us. It talked about the very well-informed debate that took place yesterday. And I just wanted to pay some tribute to you and the other leaders of districts and unitary authorities, because I know you've all worked incredibly hard. This is such a difficult thing to get over the line, to press go on it. And I suspect there are many long hours ahead of you, but I think that's really important. And your feedback to residents, to staff and councillors has been incredibly valued. So thank you so much.
That's kind of you, thank you. Now, I have an apology to make. I forgot to ask the select committee chairs whether they had any comments to make about devolution. So I suspected that they might have been bored by the amount of times we've talked about it. But similarly, LGR colleagues, would you like to say anything before we move to the vote? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I want to make just one quick comment about communication. I think you personally and the council have done a very good job about communicating to our residents how complicated this is and giving them as much information as we can. I think that's been a real success for local government, about keeping people informed if they wanted to be informed. And I've certainly had some very positive feedback from residents. helped by your presentations, about trying to explain a complicated process to them in ways that they can understand, and splitting LGR away from devolution. And I think that's been a real success for us as a council, about explaining to our residents what we're trying to do for them. And I think that I'm very pleased about that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have much to add apart from what I said at the full council meeting. So thank you.
And Bill?
Thank you, Leader. I think it is a very exciting period. I think everything that's been said today is relevant and very important. And I think, as Rob has said, our residents are asking the questions which our local councils aren't, which is very interesting. They've got open minds, they can see the future, they know the financial difficulties, and they want to move forward. And I think the teams that we've got, both in the staff and in the Cabinet, are very important, and we must ensure that during this process they all stay.
Thanks so much. As you heard yesterday, I'll stay around as long as you'll have me. Colleagues, thank you for that. I think just in summing up, Carolyn is absolutely right. This isn't a silver bullet, and Kirsty's highlighted that as well. And although there is inevitably, through the transformation and the, I think, more streamlined ways of working within local government that this reorganisation will eventually bring, there is benefit to be had that isn't going to be of a sufficient size to be able to solve the challenge of the cost of social care, and nor is it going to happen quickly enough to actually cover the cost of transformation itself. So in the short term, there is an additional burden for us with this, and this is something that we really need to have at the forefront of our thoughts, alongside the fact that inevitably it brings disruption and uncertainty, and that's disruption and uncertainty not only to the people who work for us, the people who are employed in the businesses that contract with us, and most importantly to the residents who rely upon our services, be they at our level in the county of working in all of our local communities across the 1.4 million people in Hampshire who rely upon us for their social care, for their children's education, for their access to the countryside, for the tenants of our county farms, for all of those people who interact with us in that way, but also those, for everybody else who is reliant upon their district or borough council to provide planning services, to provide leisure, to look at their community services, to collect their bins every week. And of course, in order for them to do that, they then need to have somewhere to take them, and that requires them to still come back to us as well. So we are a complex and interlinked network of councils. My colleagues and I have worked very hard, and I pay tribute to all of them for retaining good humour and positivity throughout as well in these conversations. We haven't agreed on everything. We are not going to agree on everything going forward further, and inevitably that will be the case. And that is reflected in the fact that whilst we have put forward our principles for how we think that we should where our focus should be, and how we think we should engage with the coming negotiations around what happens next. There was a move yesterday to say that for the good of local government, perhaps we should remove them. There was some irony in the fact that that was from one of the district leaders who already got some of his own principles in his own cabinet paper to do that, which he'd forgotten about, he admitted at the end of the meeting. So the point being that each of the councils need to have their own principles. They need to look after their own areas. They need to look after their own residents. It comes back to that point that I often made, which is that no one enters politics to do harm. We're just disagreeing about the way in which we do good. No one is entering the various negotiations that we have around how local government reorganisation should work in Hampshire. We all want the best outcome, and we all want to find the best way forward. The fact is that we will disagree upon what that looks like, but what we need to do so is to ensure that that's done in a positive and a friendly and a respectful way, and that in order to deliver that, eventually some of us are not going to like the outcome. And that's going to be okay, because we can't always agree on everything. and that's politics. But as you heard me admit to voting a couple of ways in referenda yesterday that may not have been the way that many of my colleagues would have voted, we equally need to accept that outcome and accept the fact that, you know, once that decision is made, we need to work with it for the best of the people, for the people of Hampshire. And I would like to pay tribute to Carolyn and to all of the other chief executives, because if you think we've been having lots of meetings about it, they've been having way more than us. And the fact that they continue to work so diligently towards a solution for us all is a really important piece of work. Quality of service, sense of place for our residents, and most of all, sustainability are the most important things that we need to consider when we take this forward. There is no point us creating new councils that are immediately in the situation of failing because they are overtaken by the cost of social care. And if that is the case, all of the really good stuff that the districts and boroughs can still afford to do will be wiped away straight away. And that, I am really aware, is something that we need to do everything we can to try and protect in that conversation. And so that becomes, I think, the focus of where we need to be. And there was a question also, just to wrap up, in Council yesterday around whether we were focusing sufficiently on the financial challenges in the response that we are putting forward now as our initial response to government. I think we are. That is in the section around barriers and challenges at point 3. Government know the challenge. Government have heard often enough from us that they either need to change the way in which we work so that we can be more innovative, we can be less constrained, and we can take advantage of charging for services where we can, and putting in place means testing for other services, which is entirely right. But without that, then they equally need to look at the way in which we are funded and our ability to raise sufficient funds to be able to meet the costs that we face. And that'll be the same for us as it is, it'll be the same for the new councils as it is for us. And so there is a much greater, much more important conversation to be had with government as we go forward around working that out. So we have the amendment in front of us. We need to vote on that first. Those in favour of including Zoe's amendment into the paper. Okay, unanimous, thank you so much. And so we equally have the recommendation which is on pages 17 to 19 in paragraphs 2 to 6, those in favour of accepting that paper. And that again is unanimous. Thank you so much, everybody. Right, we move on to item 7, which is the Care Home Improvement Programme update. What I'm going to ask first is for Jess to come and introduce the paper to us, and then we have some colleagues who would like to come and speak on the item as well. And if we then ask you to have your input, and then we'll ask questions and take things forward from there. So, oh, sorry, it's I'm sorry, Andy. It says that, yeah, Andy to present the report. My apologies.
No, thank you, Chair. So this is a finance report, but obviously Jess will join me to represent the service. So thank you. This report provides an update on the current financial status of the Care Home Improvement Programme. And you will note from the recommendations that it recommends halting the programme due to the significant changes in the overall financial business case. I'll just pull out the key points from the report. Certainly on the cost side, the overall capital cost has increased from 173 to 218 million, and within that the cost of borrowing is also greater than set out in the original business case. Importantly, since the original business case, we've introduced a new care home framework, and that has led to significant reduction in the cost for buying residential and nursing placements in the home care market, such that the rates available now to the framework would be lower than the potential rate going forward had we proceeded with the capital investment. And then overall, that combination of the increased capital costs and the reduced placement cost to purchase in the marketplace mean that the recommendation is to halt any further investment in this programme. And then the Follow-on point from that will be that officers are authorised to look at the impact of this decision on existing in-house care homes with a view to bringing back a further report to Cabinet in due course.
Super. Thanks so much, Andy. Jess, would you like to add anything to that? Or
Thank you, Leader. No, that's fine. Thank you.
okay. So we have 3 non-executive members who have been kind enough to come along and talk to us this morning rather. It seems like afternoon already. Jackie, would you like to come and present first?
Thank you. And it will come as no surprise that this is about Cornerways, which is a site in my own division. But I'm also just going to declare I'm also a city councillor and I'm the cabinet member for Place and Local Plan. And the site is also in the local plan and it's going to public inspection on the 22nd of April. So it's really extremely disappointing that Hampshire County Council is halting the care homes programme. This feels like bad news hidden in a busy week. 2 reasons are cited: the high cost of development and the capacity in the current system. I understand the first completely, but the second one, I don't feel there's any real public or adequate interrogation of the second point in this paper, except to discuss briefly the current options of the care framework, or care homes framework. We know that private nursing care can cost huge sums, and in future years and decades, we expect many people will need local authority support for their care. Can Hampshire County Council and our residents afford the cost of private care long term, even when Hampshire County Council is gone, even under the care home framework? This programme was ambitious to create high quality, high dependency care in places where it's needed across the county. Councillor Williams is also here today, describing the agony of families and employees as care homes were closed across the county, and that storm was weathered, and we are where we are today. So my question is about 2 recommendations. Recommendation 5, further investment is halted. What exactly does halt mean? Does that mean cancellation of the scheme or just kicking it down the road for another authority to deliver? And you've just been discussing that very, very similar point. And recommendation 6, with a view to bring back a further report in due course. As I said, I represent the area where one of the new homes was to be built. It's in the Emerging Local Plan 2040, which will be the subject of public inspection from the 22nd of April. We talk about the Cornerways site, but in fact there were 2 homes on that site. Merrydale, the children's home, closed too, and Merrydale currently provides homes through the Property Guardian scheme, really affordable homes. The Cornerways care home closed nearly a decade ago. The public has been demanding better use of this redundant building ever since. They watched it rot through COVID when care was so desperately needed, and in 2022 when refugees needed homes too. They hate to see potential homes unused, especially when they know that commercial nursing homes that their own families are going to are so expensive. Frankly, I've had a lot more engagement on this than the devolution subject, without even trying. In considering sites for development within the village of Kingsworthy for the local plan, the overwhelming interest for the public was on developing this site to its potential. And my frequent questions to Hampshire County Council have always indicated this would be developed as a nursing home, even in this financial year, or even in this calendar year. So what happens next? Is Hampshire County Council going to consider this site and other sites under the One Public Estate scheme, or sell the site on the private market for a different form of adult social care or housing? How and when will the community know what will happen next? This isn't covered in this paper, and I believe it should be. And I know you said in due course, but what's due course? But also, to put the site in context, Cornerways is very close to Kingsworthy Primary School. At the very first closure of that site, the school was full to the brim and there was no space to expand the number of school places. But in 2025, despite being a popular school, there are spaces, especially in the lower years. And we see that happening across Winchester. This is the result of lower birth rates, and the opportunity to go to other nearby schools, both academy and private, means there's now capacity for family homes on the Cornerways site that there wasn't in 2016-2017. The school would welcome more children living locally who can walk to their local school and enjoy good support, whatever their needs. But I am concerned that family homes will create greater traffic needs than the care home plan that was there before. The road is narrow, the area is busier than ever, much of this traffic is feeding into or affected by the Cart and Horses Junction. Prices in Winchester are high though. This would be an opportunity to build affordable homes for all stages of life, including older persons accommodation. We have popular elderly persons bungalows right alongside this site, which will have to be taken consideration as part of the planning. But there is the other aspect of this site which I touched on earlier. Winchester City Council is an advocate of homes for all. This includes a home even when you're dependent on others for your daily needs. Kingsworthy residents supported this site for older persons accommodation. I was supportive too. They and I are conscious that a new nursing home would not only provide homes, but provide meaningful employment too. So this definitely feels as if this decision, which leaves everything hanging, is actually being hidden away on a big news day. What exactly are you planning for the site? When will residents know? Residents will be extremely disappointed that the site plans for Cornways are halted, not postponed, shelved, replanned, just halted. What is the long-term financial case for not building out newer care homes, and how and when will Hampshire Council decide what they're going to do with the land instead? Kingsworthy residents would like to know, and so would I. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. What we'll do is we'll come back in our questions to those points for you. So, Jonathan, welcome. So, Jonathan, you're very welcome. This is the first time that you've addressed Cabinet, so welcome, and as a relatively new member in the sense of having won the by-election in the autumn. I hope that we'll see you here again whenever you feel you'd like to come and talk to us. So do carry away.
Excellent, thank you. As you well know, the closure of the much-loved Bishop's Waltham Care Home still hurts residents in my area, so I will just touch on that to start with. 25,000 people signed a online petition with additional 2,000 additional paper signatures, all against the closure of our care home. And it was our care home. It was local. Staff who lived local went above and beyond to care for the local residents there. The open days brought in the community to share their love for the care home and enhance the experience for residents. And residents of Bishop's Waltham always knew that there would be an affordable care home so that they could, should they need, go to that care home for extra care and support. The home has since closed, despite the pleas of the local community, as I mentioned, which is why today's proposals reopens wounds and hurts even more. In the past week, I've spoken with families who have had their relatives moved from Bishop's Waltham House, one of which asked me to read out her words today. So starting from her words, I've tried so many times to try and put into words how the decision to close Bishop's Waltham House has affected us, but I just can't find any to do the last year's pain justice. I've heard of so many former residents that have passed away. You could argue it may have happened due to age, but speaking to families, the disruptive move was detrimental to their decline in health. That said, none of my words mean anything now. Nothing can give us back what we had. Finding good care homes is really hard to do, so to shut one that was so good feels criminal. When I heard they are no longer building the new care homes, my heart again broke. They moved my grandmother at 103 years old out of the place she called home, somewhere where she felt safe and cared for. She worked all her life, and when she needed something back, you let her down. So quite touching words, but what to today's proposals and what about the future of Bishop's Waltham House? It appears that today's proposal is a little bit out of the blue, as Councillor Porter mentioned, potentially buried sort of in a larger story, really. But today's proposal lacks detailed justification, and it has not had sufficient scrutiny. The proposals to close the care homes across Hampshire and invest in new larger care homes did have that sufficient scrutiny through last year's cross-party working group, faced committee scrutiny, as well as the decision day last year. Today we have proposals to potentially scrap a scrutinised capital investment programme with no plan for those existing care homes that have been closed now. So I urge you today to defer your decision to ensure that there can be other options looked at, such as scaling back the new care homes capital investment instead of scrapping it. Should you decide not to defer, I would refer to my question at full council last month regarding the future of Bishop's Waltham House. I have long had meetings with the local GPs and the ICB representatives prior to becoming a county councillor, and want to stress how important it is, how important a new surgery is to residents of Bishop's Waltham and the surrounding area. Just to put in context, the current GP surgery is designed for 7,000 patients. They have 14,000 on their list, and even then the current room sizes do not meet NHS standards. They're half the size of what they need to be, meaning just to meet current demands, that current surgery would have to quadruple in size just to meet current demand, and there isn't enough space on the existing site to do this. I know too that the ICB suggestion in a previous HASC meeting has been to explore the possibility of using Bishop's Waltham House as a much needed GP surgery expansion in Bishop's Waltham. It has been identified as well by GPs of one of only 2 sites remaining in Bishop's Waltham that could accommodate a new surgery of sufficient size. So once again, I urge you to defer today's decision to firstly ensure that many unanswered questions and gaps in information can be scrutinised and explored. And if you decide to go ahead with scrapping the scheme, I urge officers and the assets team to meet with interested councillors. I know Councillor Weiss would be, as many of his residents are registered at Bishop's Waltham Surgery as well. To meet also with GPs and ICB representatives to explore the possibility of using Bishop's Waltham House as a new GP surgery to safeguard primary care for the residents of Bishop's Waltham and the surrounding area.
Jonathan, thanks very much. That's really helpful. We'll try and address some of those comments amongst our debate and the questions that we ask just in a minute, if that's all right. Malcolm. So, welcome once again. I suspect you're talking about a similar issue to that of Jonathan, but far away.
Thank you. I was surprised to see this paper come up today. It's a significant change in direction, only 20 months since the last plan came out, which brought about the closure of 5 care homes despite the big public outcry that Councillor Williams has just talked about. Going through this paper, and I had a lot of questions, and actually I've been contacted by residents already who have a lot of questions as well. What went wrong with the last plan? Just starting there, how have these errors occurred? I mean, on what basis were the costs prepared? It should come as no surprise that costs go up. You know, they've risen in the past 20 months and borrowing rates change. What investigation consideration has been given to the liability of those for professional negligence who prepared the cost estimates that are out of date within 20 months? What has been the progress against that original plan? What's been achieved to date? I think residents might be surprised to learn that 20 months after a decision was made to invest 173 million into Hampshire care homes, that builds haven't started, and there's questions around why that is. What's the cost of the consultation that was performed in 2023 and the preparation of that report, that including the professional fees in evaluating the options, design fees, quantity surveyors fees and similar, they've all gone into that old plan. So there's a whole load of questions around the plan that we have been working to, but there's also a whole bunch of questions around the new plan as well. The new plan puts absolute reliance on the private sector meeting all future needs. So it's critical we have a thorough understanding of the risks associated with the new plan. For example, it's my understanding that the care home framework is only a basis for negotiation. It's not a contractual commitment to take all those whom the county council has responsibility for. So what formal undertakings have been given by private care home businesses, and for how long do their undertakings last? We have responsibility as a council to look after adults for decades to come. How long is this care home framework going to be in place? What is the risk of the care homes defaulting on the agreement or closing? We all know with the example of Southern Cross, which was the largest care home network in the UK, which declared insolvency in 2012. You know, what happens if if the private care homes close? What is the impact on hospital discharges? Does the care home framework put any requirements on having availability for patients? We've got an ongoing challenge with getting patients out of hospitals as quickly as possible. What are the implications of this change of plan on that? Why can private sector make the business case work when the county can't? How is it that private sector can provide accommodation and make a profit while the county has no obligation to pay a return on the capital of the owners but remains uncompetitive? What additional risks are we inviting by putting reliance on private care homes, effectively putting all our eggs in one basket? This is particularly pertinent given the situation we find ourselves in, where our direction of travel has shifted significantly in less than 2 years. The care home framework's only been in place for 8 months. This is a very short time for the experience to demonstrate success and to use for making a decision on care provision for coming decades. So there's a lot of questions there, and there's been more questions from my colleagues, and I'm sure there are other questions from members of, for example, the Adult Care Committee. Therefore, I would encourage you to pause making any decision today whilst the issues are given the chance to be properly reviewed. And recommendation 5 says, agree that any further investment on the proposed scheme is halted. I would suggest that we change that to paused while we do a proper investigation and give this decision the proper scrutiny it needs before it is made. And similarly on recommendation 6, change that to review the entire decision and bring it to a scrutiny committee, the appropriate scrutiny committee, presumably the Health and Adult Social Care Select Committee, before proceeding. And the review should include what progress has been made, establishing professional liabilities for the production of the building estimates, establishing a reliable basis for contracts with providers, especially contract lengths, notice periods, guarantees, explain to those who responded to the earlier consultation what has gone wrong and to invite their views. And specifically, amongst all this, we need to define the timescale about when this is all going to happen. At the moment, recommendation 6 says we'll come back at some point. For me, that's not good enough. We need to be saying, right, we need to, if we're going to do this change, we have to have a clear timescale laid out about when we're going to do things. So the decisions that are being made here are affecting the lives and welfare of some of our most vulnerable residents, as well as impacting the council's finances, both in the short and the longer term. The abrupt change in policy is a cause for concern and doesn't build confidence. Therefore, it's important that this decision is reviewed by scrutiny and that all the issues are resolved and the risks clarified before the county council moves forward. And I hope the Cabinet will pause any decision to give time to fully evaluate the way forward and to mitigate the risks associated with this new plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. And again, we'll address that in the questions and the debate we're about to have. So, Jess, did you want to address any of the questions that were raised there? I mean, are you happy to do that, or?
Yes, of course, Leader. That's fine. And I think they broadly cover a number of issues. And if we start with governance, then Andy will come in and talk to you about the financial case. And then certainly I can follow up with specific questions around the closure of Bishop's Waltham House. And then I think we'll come back to Andy in terms of looking at the future of sites. So forgive me, I think that covers the 4 main elements.
I think that's a sensible way to do it. So,
shall I?
You want to start off and then, yeah.
That's fine. Just to assure the members that have spoken today and to thank them, that the governance around the decision before you is correct, because this is just about the decision to stop the care home improvement programme, given the significant change in the financial case for it. In the report, officers are asking for authorisation to look at the impact of this decision on in-house homes with a view to bringing back a further report in due course that will follow democratic process and will be scrutinised as appropriate, of course. It is too early for us to determine the outcomes of that work, which has only just started, and will continue, as we have done so far, to work closely with Adults Health and Care Scrutiny Committee, Executive Member and Cabinet as work progresses. So I think that is really important point to make. It really is too early for us to determine the outcomes of that work. But as Andy will describe to you, the financial case has changed so significantly that we thought it was important to come for that decision first today. And I'll hand over to Andy for that aspect. Thank you, Leader.
Super, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I guess I'd start by saying it's interesting, isn't it, that this report is in Rob's name as a CFO, because primarily this is a financial decision based on the current financial position of the County Council and the current financial position of this business case. So a reminder that we will all know the county's gap as we look forward to 25, 26, 26, 27, a financial shortfall of £136 million for 26, 27. And then that brings us to the decision in hand. We have a business case that's increased significantly in cost by nearly 50 million. And I'm not sure that is anything to do with errors in original costings. I think that just reflects two major things. The first is the market conditions around finance and the cost of borrowing, which has increased as set out in the report. And equally important, construction costs. We've all seen it in the press, primarily on the back of probably the Ukraine war and inflation pressures, but construction costs have increased significantly for that reason. So it's not a technical issue, it's just a cost issue in terms of delivering the scheme. The care home framework also brings rates in lower than we believe we will deliver through the new programme, so therefore there's a revenue saving and consequence to the county council as we go forward, which we can't ignore. So on the financial front, Rob has brought this forward in terms of its unaffordability in its current position to proceed. So I think I'll leave my comments there, Leader.
Super, thanks so much. So back to Jess again.
Thank you. And if I could just come in on the care home framework and talk a little bit more about that. So you may not know this, we have 300 residential care homes across Hampshire, of which we currently run 12 homes. So it's important to take that perspective into account. At the time of the business case put forward in 2023, just after COVID, the costs and supply of care home beds for older adults, including those with dementia and high needs, that there was no mechanism for managing those costs in place. We're really pleased to say that with the care home framework, which is sustainable and we have found really reliable in reducing costs, we introduced this 8 months ago, and 208 independent sector homes have signed up to it. So the supply of affordable beds in the independent sector has therefore increased significantly. And I think it's important to mention at this point the stark nature of the shift in business case costs in those finances as part of the rationale that Andy has put forward there. But we are lucky in Adults Health and Care. We have significant commissioning capacity, and we have worked through the points with regard to the residential and nursing care home market very carefully as part of that review of the financial business case. So Adults Health and Care have really been involved in supporting that review. Thank you. And if I can move on to the important points raised by members with regard to the closures that were consulted on and scrutiny committee were involved in and have taken place in 2023 and 2024. Bishop's Waltham House was a really good quality home, and I hear the points about it being very important to the community. And we never take moving people lightly. However, I would like to say that we brought a scrutiny paper later in the autumn last year talking about the really sensitive work that had gone on with really good outcomes for people who had moved from Bishop's Waltham House and the other 2 homes involved into other residential homes nearby, and how well that process had been undertaken and how well it had gone, and feedback there. It is regrettable that we have had to revisit this, but I think whatever happened, we would still have looked to need to propose to close those homes because of the older nature of those buildings and the fact that they provided care for people that did not have high level dementia need, and so that's an important point. And then I will hand back to Andy to talk about the future of the sites that were referred to by members, if that's okay, Leader.
That's fine. So back to Andy.
Thank you, Leader. So if we went back to recommendation 6, which sets out that you authorise officers to look at the impact of this decision with a view to bring back further reports, and then in the context of the sites, that therefore means we've made no decisions yet on the future of any of the sites, and each one needs to be reviewed as part of the next phase of the work and future options considered. In terms of approach, members will be aware if sites are deemed surplus, there's a standard approach we take, including considering alternative county council use on a business case basis through a variety of routes to freehold or leasehold disposal, but none of those decisions have been made because they will all form part of the next stage, which is to review the impact of this decision.
Super. Thanks so much, both of you. That I think is really helpful in terms of understanding the context of the comments that each of the members so eloquently put. Any additional questions? Russell, have you got a question or debate? Debate. Okie dokie.
Sorry, do you want me to? I did have a question, Leader, but it's
But it's
been
kind
covered.
of been answered.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super. Russell, we're into debate.
Thank you, Leader. And I just wanted to start by saying I've discussed this decision at length with Liz Fairhurst, who unfortunately couldn't be here for this Cabinet meeting today. But I know if she was here, she'd say something similar to what I'm about to say, which is, we think this is the right decision for now. This is the value for money decision for now. I'm going to quote John Maynard Keynes, who said, "When the facts change, I change my mind." Well, the facts have changed here. So this is the right decision for us to take at this time. And when I say the facts have changed, we know that interest rates have gone up, inflation has changed the prices. We know the differential between the private sector beds prices and the public sector beds prices has changed. And I think that's enough in itself when you look at those facts. But there's another aspect of this, which is the context has changed as well in the last year and a half or 2 years. We're in a different situation, a new government, we've got a devolution programme, we've got the Casey Commission that's just about to get underway. So a lot has changed, and it's right for us to change our minds when the facts change. But, and this is a key point, we monitor things very closely in Hampshire County Council, and if the facts change again, then we may come back with a different decision. And part of staying nimble and opportunistic and commercial as an organisation is that we do look at things on a case-by-case basis. And, you know, as Andy was just saying, buildings will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and there may be opportunities to do different things there. Something Liz and I talked about at length was whether this should be a pause or a halting. And so I was interested that Councillor Wallace suggested a pause, which is a fair suggestion. We had the same thought, actually. But we were persuaded that it's better to halt this now because it then creates a blank canvas to actually review all options properly and come back with a new policy, which Jess referred to, and that work is just getting underway now. So it's not the right moment to talk about what that might be. But there are opportunities, and I'm pleased that we are now going to explore different ways of working with the private sector, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Super, thanks. Any other comments, everybody? No other comments from Cabinet colleagues, in which case I will come to Bill. Sorry, Bill.
Thank you, Leader. As chairman of the task and working group that looked at this subject, the cross-party decision at the end of the day was to support all the recommendations for the proposal of either closure, refurbishment or new care homes because of the present complex needs and the future growth of complex needs within our county and the ever-aging population that we've received. As part of that working group, I asked that we looked at a 10-mile radius around each of the proposals to see what care homes were available, either residential, complex needs or for dementia. And it was surprising to see how many, and in particular around Bishop Waltham, were available to residents that should that facility close. I think we took almost 6 months in this process of working towards a conclusion for the HASC committee to make a decision on that subject matter. And noting that we had 300 care homes plus growing all the time in Hampshire, we considered and fully agreed the proposals that were made on those recommendations. The care home framework has been a success, will continue to be a success, and the fact that we can maintain a commission price of £1,000 a week for the 208 independent sexual homes that have signed up to it shows the sterling work that our officers have done in negotiating this framework. The last point I'd like to make, one of the big questions we asked about the 27,000 people that registered their interests on this subject matter. Only 724 people were registered within the postal codes of those care homes that were affected. So people need to understand the jurisdiction that each process goes through when we're looking at the closure or new building of any establishments within our county. It is run strictly and was fully observed by the officers, and the working group was in total agreement. None of us like any closures or potential closures that happen in the health and adult social care. So I think the recommendation should be today that the HASC set up a working task group to review this report and come back to Cabinet in due course.
Okay, thanks so much, Bill. Jonathan, Rob, anything to say? No. Okay. In which case, let me sum up. Sorry, Bill. Can I just check in? So, are you suggesting that you should review this programme going forward once we begin to look at that new landscape, or do you want to review this decision?
Well, I understand you haven't made a decision yet. I'm just suggesting that from the comments today that it comes back to HASC to review this report.
Jess?
Just to come in there, I wonder whether Councillor Withers, whether it would be appropriate. We're just embarking on a piece of work to look at the implications of this for HCC care and support care homes. I think there's ultimately that financial decision around the capital strategy, but the next steps, absolutely, I would be more than happy to bring to you through HASC, and I wonder whether the next steps is the part that might be better served through that HASC process. Thank you.
And I think I think that's exactly the point, because actually this is a finance decision, and so it would actually be something for 2050 to look at officially, rather than HASC in terms of making the financial decision that we're being asked to make today, because it is a report of the Chief Financial Officer. But I think the impact of it, Bill, is the bit that HASC should be looking at, and that I think I'd look at my colleagues, but I think we'd all be very supportive of that happening. So that's probably the best way forward if you're happy with that.
Very happy, Leader.
Great, thank you. So let me just try and sum up a little bit, which is that at the end of the day, when we announce something that is as positive as the plans that we had last year, particularly off the back of looking at some of the care homes that we had to agree to either close or repurpose as a consequence of the plan, that it's something that none of us really want to do in terms of having to change that plan once you've made it. However, we are in a place where our financial situation, and more importantly the financial situation of the country, is such that the picture is changing. And as Russell has said, it is entirely right for us to remain agile and to look at the situation in front of us and make a decision from there. It's entirely right that we review the market. There are now over 14,000 care home beds in Hampshire. We've heard from Jess that we already contract with over 208 providers of individual of homes that provide some of those places, and our place in the market has been an ever decreasing one in terms of the number of beds that we ourselves provide. So our ability to influence the market becomes less, in one respect because we aren't so much of a provider there, but equally we are an ever increasing commissioner of those beds. And as the number of people for whom we pay in private care homes increases, that does mean that we are able to obtain a better deal in terms of the framework that we can operate. And I think the commissioning teams and Jess have done a fantastic job in creating that. So actually, in a sense, this is around a consequence of the good news that brings and of the success that we've had in being able to create a much more advantageous situation for the County Council in our purchase of care home beds. I think with respect to the comments about this coming out of the blue, it doesn't come out of the blue entirely, because it was one of the recommendations that was made for us to consider as part of the independent panel report that was presented to Council in February as part of our financial reports back then. I entirely accept that it might be something that isn't immediately apparent in terms of that link between the two things, but it is something that the independent panel, who were scrutinising what we were doing, said maybe you should start looking at this because of the change in your market. It doesn't mean that we scrap the entire programme, but it does mean that it's right that we look at it again. And I think the changes that we have to consider here, actually much of it is at the door of government. It is the government's financial decisions, to make a political point, it's the government's financial decisions that have caused us to be in a situation where interest rates have been rising. And it is actually, looking forward, the government's decision to change the way in which they manage local housing need and local housing delivery by way of opening the door to a substantial increase in the amount of development in Hampshire that places a risk at our door of further inflation in the construction market. Because as developers are given the go-ahead to build pretty much where they like as a consequence of there not being 5-year housing land supply in a lot of our districts, then that inevitably will create greater competition for the very limited stocks of both material and the limited numbers of people able to work in the industry that we have. So it's right for us to look at that point. And I think hopefully the questions about what happens to the site have provided you provide each of our colleagues with some reassurance around how we will look at it and how we take it going forward. And Jonathan, I was struck by actually the point that you were making, which was a really good one around the need to work with the ICB around Bishop's Waltham House because of the failure of their current estate to be able to meet the criteria of the and the standards that the NHS set. And that indeed was one of the reasons why we had to look at those care home sites in the first place, because with our older homes, they didn't meet the criteria that the care home, that the NHS and that the CQC expect. And indeed, in a different way in Romsey, in my area, there's been a very similar situation where Edwina Mountbatten House, which was a charitable institution, closed as a consequence of exactly the same thing, of not being able to meet that need. And it's now being replaced by a modern care home facility that has an even greater capacity than that which they had. And that's the way that the market has been moving. So whilst I think we all completely understand the concerns that each of you have raised, we equally see that this is not a matter of just saying, well, we're not doing any of this and we're not going to have a mind to how we manage things in the future. It is a matter of us looking and saying we live already in different times to those of 2 years ago, when the decisions that we had originally made were being considered. We talk about being commercial, we talk about being agile, we talk about responding to the conditions in which we find ourselves, and that is absolutely what we're doing here. Things are changing. We need to respond to an ever increasing and ever more complex need. And in doing so, we need to use every single lever we have at our disposal to use our money and the resource under which we are under ever increasing pressure to the best of its ability. And it's right that we stop and that we look at this, but I'm very happy that we agree that there should be scrutiny of what we do going forward and the impact that it has, because that's entirely right. And it is right, actually, that it sits under HASC rather than under the 2050 committee that it would otherwise do if we were to require scrutiny of this prior to actually making this decision. So I'm very happy to support this decision, but I'm equally happy to give you an undertaking that we will continue to look at that going forward, and in doing so ensure that we are responding to the market and making sure that we are mindful of all of the comments that you've made today. So we have the recommendations in front of us. They're on page 79 in paragraphs 2 to 6. Can I have all of those in favour, please? So again, that's a unanimous decision. Jess and Andy, thank you so much for your input, and thank you to each of you for coming along and letting us have your thoughts. I think that is the end of our meeting. So a little bit longer than I thought it might be, but thank you for coming along and being with us.